Okay, so that is going to take us into our final session of the day, where we are going to talk about transforming the future of industrial operations, which is going to be insights from Rockwell Automation's 9th annual State of Smart Manufacturing. So please welcome from Kalypso, a Rockwell Automation business, the Principal of Data Science and IIoT, Austin Locke, the Global CPG Digital Services Lead, Steve Riordan, and MLC's founder, David Brosell.
This man, this dutiful man, has got this sense of devotion.
Well, welcome. Thank you. Welcome. We're going to have a very interesting conversation today about a very important report that Rockwell has done now for the 9th time about smart manufacturing. If you were here this morning, you know I cited Rockwell for a very important study they did around the turn of the century that influenced us greatly here at MLC. Yeah. And I've always had a great respect for the work you guys do. So why don't you introduce yourselves and say what you do at Rockwell? I think everybody knows Rockwell. They may not know Kalypso, though.
Probably don't.
So why don't you just quickly do that? Go first?
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Riordan. I'm what's called a principal in Kalypso. I have responsibility for our consumer packaged goods business globally, and I'm inside Kalypso, which is the digital professional services arm for Rockwell Automation.
My name's Austin Locke. I lead our AI services group at Rockwell. So we help other manufacturers make the most use of their data.
Yeah, David, I wanted to add, ironically, we just celebrated our 20-year anniversary as Kalypso last week.
Oh, congratulations. That's remarkable. That's great. So shall we dive into smart manufacturing?
Yeah.
So this is the 9th annual survey you've done of this subject. And maybe you could give us a point in time of where we stand as an industry with smart manufacturing?
Yeah.
How far along the curve we might be? Maybe we could use, like I had used earlier today, a simple scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
Are we at a 4? Are we at a 7? Are we at a 5? Where might we be? And we could start there.
Yeah, no, it sounds good.
How smart are we at this point?
Yeah, and whenever we say smart manufacturing, we mean digital manufacturing in the report.
Right.
It was a term we started 9 years ago and just kept, rolling that forward. So I'll try to use some of the data from the report to talk about that. So one of the first things we saw is that we asked how important is this digital manufacturing journey, and not surprisingly, 95% of respondents said it was moderately to extremely important. So not a surprise. And it's not a surprise if you look at most public traded companies now, they're going to have something in an investor relations deck that mentions something about, digital transformation in manufacturing. Then we went to ask us like how far along are you towards adopting this at scale? And what we found is the answers, depending on region and industry, were somewhere between 10% and 18%. So there's this aspiration versus execution gap that we saw in our data.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have seen similar things in MLC research. And the question becomes, how do you close that gap? Does the research that you've done here in this study give any indication about how to do that?
It does. So we track it from year to year. I'd say the use cases that jumped up this year were all around, not surprisingly, AI, and also around cybersecurity. So those were two of the ones that really jumped up. The other thing we saw is that if you connect the dots around that aspiration gap, is we saw a jump of 30% in the intent to spend in 2024 coming out of the survey as well.
And what was it saying about AI? Is there the intentions very strong going forward? And are you also anticipating a kind of a gap with this one?
Yeah, I think the intention's strong. In the report, 82% of manufacturers said that they either have invested or intend to invest in the next 12 months in AI. What really stood out to me in the report, kind of related to the topic of AI, is that in the age of artificial intelligence, there's a really big focus on human intelligence coming through in the responses. And I'll give you a few examples. So 94%, almost every single manufacturer that responded, said that they intend to maintain or grow their workforce as a part of their smart manufacturing transformation. Another good point, manufacturers were polled and asked how they intend to address both internal and external challenges to their business. And for the external challenges, the number one response outside of investing in technology was, we're going to bring in new talent. And for the internal challenges, they said, well, we're going to reskill and upskill our existing talent. And then I think you even see like a really interesting paradigm shift in the industry right now where like machine learning is being positioned as machine teaching, or artificial intelligence is being positioned as engineered intelligence, which is essentially acknowledging that the operator who's at the center of all of this, they know the process better than anyone. And the tools, AI, is not about replacing those operators. It's about taking their knowledge, which is incredibly valuable and special, and then codifying that in the technology so that they can have a reduced cognitive burden of running these really complex operations. So I thought that sort of the human element and emphasis on human-centered and operator kind of centric focus really stood out to me in the survey this year.
We're seeing very similar results in our MLC research, particularly around the question of, do you think AI will result in an increase in your workforce, no increase, or do you think it will result in job losses? Let me drill down a little bit on that within the context of, for a lot of these companies, they're very early on with AI. They may have used BI tools, Power BI tools, and that have been around for a long time. And I think a lot of this is being influenced by Gen AI, the responses you're getting and the responses we're getting. But I think still a lot of companies are at the early stages. Do you think this response about jobs is influenced by this, that once they start moving and getting more experience and more time under the belt, so to speak, with using AI, this view could change?
What do you think?
I don't think so. I really think that, so I guess first I'll address your comment around kind of like generative AI. I completely agree that like the limelight and spotlight that's being cast around generative AI is creating new opportunities for like traditional AI and machine learning and growing investment in those disciplines. And if you think about what it really takes to apply AI to an industrial process where your goals are safety, stability, repeatability, I mean, that really lends itself well towards more causal AI as opposed to generating new content all of the time. And there's so much process expertise that needs to go into that modeling exercise to really optimize an industrial process that I don't think the tools are going to, mature, and then the operators or the people that are involved in the process will all, go to the wayside or anything like that. I think that they'll just be able to focus on other higher value-added activities. And so I think that's why manufacturers are saying we're going to continue to grow and invest in our people.
Yeah, and given the shortages, the historic shortages, it's a priority to keep people. It's really important to keep people because you can't find a lot of people.
Sure.
So it's one of those, you know, the language we're using around this is very important. We, at MLC, we tend to use the phrase industrial AI and talk about it from that point of view, because it seems more applicable to us
Right.
for the industrial environment rather than a more consumer sort of application. I also like the phrase very much called augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. When it comes to smart manufacturing, is there also, did you find through the study, is there also a variation in how people define smart manufacturing?
I can take a first cut at that. If you look at our survey, it's built from 2015, so that definition has evolved.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty liberal definition of what's in that box, and the prioritization of that is changed over time.
Yeah, yeah. So thinking about AI in the industrial sense, Austin, you mentioned a couple of opportunities for manufacturers with the technology. Let's go into that a little deeper, but also talk a little bit about the challenges they're going to have with implementing this technology and really optimizing it within their organizations. Do you want to take the opportunity piece
Go
first?
first on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think sort of the traditional machine learning or industrial AI use cases are gaining momentum and traction right now. And that would include things like, predictive maintenance, which has been talked about.
Yep.
I think there's been great advancements in vision. Sort of the barrier to entry on machine vision has gone way down. Advanced process control is another, I think, really interesting application of AI in the industrial environment. An interesting point from the survey was manufacturers were asked which of all the digital use cases provide the highest return on investment. And those AI use cases consistently ranked at the top. Cloud and SaaS was also highly ranked, which I thought was interesting. But again, the challenge that it creates are both technical and organizational. Because to really get the value out of these AI investments, it has to be done at scale. It can't just be a proof of concept on one line or at one site. You have to, build it up, industrialize it, and then scale it across the network. And to be able to do that for AI, it does take a unique, I'll call it architecture instead of technology. You have to have things like bidirectional communication with PLCs. You have to have kind of an edge acquisition layer. You're certainly going to use the power of the cloud and the compute that's available there for model training. So there's like a whole technical architecture that needs to be in place to do these use cases at scale. But then there's also organizational challenges, sort of the governance structure, the way that sites collaborate and communicate. The example from Whirlpool I thought was excellent, talking about how they built a kind of clear roadmap and vision and then scaled some of their use cases. So I think you have to have both the technical side of things and the architecture, but you also have to have the right kind of organizational components and governance in place to really get the value out of these AI applications.
For sure.
We actually did 3 different times in the survey, talked about obstacles versus around obstacles to growth, and Austin covered a couple of those things. Then obstacles to rolling out smart manufacturing. And on that one, 5 at the top, 8 issues were people, challenges and issues. And then lastly was, what are the biggest obstacles for the workforce? And the number one by far was change management. So 34% of the respondents said that was their number one issue. And so that human element baked into all the technology has come out loud and clear in the survey.
Yeah, any other obstacles that really rose to the surface through the survey?
Not surprisingly, the number one ranked one in rolling out smart manufacturing was budget, so we weren't surprised by that.
More heavily influenced for the small and medium-sized companies than the larger ones?
I'm trying to think if it was number one overall, so I don't have it how it was broken out in detail.
Yeah, anything else you want to mention on the obstacle side?
I mean, externally, it was the things that you would likely expect. I think that the top four were inflation, cybersecurity, energy, and labor acquisition and retention.
Yeah.
Were the external
Yeah.
challenges.
And the interesting thing is that even in this last year, anything to do with COVID now is off the list.
It's off the list.
Yeah, so it's now, the intransigence of the economy, the intransigence of the people problems, and then cybersecurity popped up into that.
What about legacy system issues? I mean, this has come up a couple times today in some of the case study presentations. Did that surface also in the research?
It showed up as being an obstacle in terms of having the infrastructure, the foundation, in order to do some more of the fun stuff. And I think that was number 4 on the obstacle list.
Yeah, I'm kind of not surprised.
Yeah.
Of course, AI is only one technology you looked at in terms of what people need for the smart factory journey, if I can put it that way. So what other key technologies are manufacturing prioritizing, or should they prioritize to aid them on their smart factory journey?
I think this year we saw a lot more investment and respondents saying that they intend to invest in automation solutions. So if you think about advanced material handling applications, autonomous mobile robots, fixed robotics, I think that is becoming an increasingly prominent part of the kind of digital technology discussion.
Yeah.
Another one that wasn't referenced that frequently in the report that I actually find a little bit surprising because we're talking about it so much right now is kind of the idea or concept of digital twins. And I think that is really complementary, a very complementary capability to the investment in advanced automation because it supports the design and commissioning of those systems, so reduces the cost of implementing that technology, and then can also be used as a living asset afterwards to optimize those systems, train other models against them. And so I guess, maybe not in the report, but anecdotally in a lot of the clients that we're having conversations with, I think, digital twin, advanced kind of simulation is another very prominent capability right now.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, we haven't talked a lot about greenfield, today. I haven't heard a lot about it, but that's a great example where we're getting a lot of pull and demand for digital twins so that we can either at the outset of the design, make decisions in a virtual world before a physical commitment, but definitely in the commissioning stage. So that's happening. I think that's a high use case we haven't talked a lot about.
Yeah, MLC members have really expressed themselves on this digital twin situation. We've scheduled quite a few webinar sessions around digital twins because the interest level among our members is so high on that. I would agree. I think it's a fundamental type of technology you're going to need for these smart factories going forward. Any other technologies they're prioritizing and investing in, or do you want to mention?
I mean, more like data mosaics, more foundational stuff.
I mean, they're still investing in IoT, right?
Yeah, sort of the emerging IoT concept right now is what's being marketed as industrial data operations. But at its core, it's around providing context to the data that you're storing so that it's more inherently accessible and usable for all the data science use cases that we've talked about.
Yeah.
So I think you see that from a lot of different software providers, from all the hyperscalers, the major cloud providers. I would say that's a kind of a interesting technology trend right now, which is to advance and speed the development of AI-related use cases.
Yeah. Of course, all these things we're talking about are not discrete entities.
Correct.
These are all connected. Robotics and AI are connected. The IoT, data, analytics, it's all connected. So you really have to have these in combination to create a smart factory. How do I know I have a smart factory?
Right.
Someone might be asking. And it eventually comes down to, do you have the right data coming out of your systems to influence your decision making in a positive way? enable you to do things faster and more accurately, perhaps less intuitively, but more accurately. To me, that would be a measure of a smart factory or an intelligent factory, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was, to your point, I think one of the questions that manufacturers were pulled on in the survey was how well they feel like they leverage the data that their organization captures and is available. And, you know, kind of at the top end, the largest manufacturers, I think it was 10 billion and above, about half felt like they make good use of their data. And then organizations kind of below that revenue threshold, it was in the low 30s that feel like they're really taking advantage of it. So you have this kind of interesting paradigm where like there's so much potential in the technology and people are enthusiastic about these use cases and intend to invest in them, but they're dependent upon that underlying architecture and having, you know, the right data available to solve it.
Yeah, this is a challenge because I think we saw some data points this morning about data growth. In fact, we just released a survey this week on data mastery. We call it data mastery. And there's a very significant percentage of the respondents are saying they expect their data volumes to grow 500% within the next few years. And we saw this a few years ago too. And you start thinking about those data volumes, and you know, sometimes you'll ask companies about this, and they'll say, "Oh, it's no problem. We can handle all those volumes." But it's a little bit more complicated than that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Any advice on how best to handle it? Anything out of the survey would give them advice on how to deal with this mushroom, this mushrooming problem?
It's not really in the survey, but any good anecdotes?
Well, yeah, I think I think you see growth in like, you know, what's called like an edge-in architecture.
Yeah.
So being able to leverage some of the advantages of, you know, edge compute in addition to the cloud. I think you really have to have both to be successful when you're controlling an industrial process. Obviously, you know, you have latency and security and everything that goes along with that.
Right.
And so, you know, that supports kind of an edge-in architecture. And you know, you can do pre-processing on data and things like that before you move it into the cloud or move it into storage. So there's like some kind of practical steps that can be taken.
Yeah, and you got to make sure the formats are right. It's normalized. You know, if you have, like one of our presenters today was saying 140 plants, that is probably a collection of disparate systems.
For sure.
Generating all kinds of data, and that data may not actually match the other data.
Yeah.
You know, you got to put all that together to try to get a holistic picture of how the business is actually doing. You know, but that's a real challenge. I think.
And we don't ever want to see data be an obstacle, though, to doing use cases in the factory. So we're big proponents of thinking about, you know, the business problem or the optimization need, and then bumping that up against what the viability of doing that based on the data and the computing infrastructure. So we're not big believers on foundation first, rather coming at it from the business problem, the business use case, what technology is required to do that, and what's the data available to pull it off is the criteria for prioritizing what to go after.
So what are some of the characteristics of a successful digital manufacturing transformation?
Yeah. Humbly, we'll try to add to what everybody else has talked about today. A lot of really good points. So I think I'm going to use maybe a baseball analogy. So for a baseball game, you know, the manager's got to ahead of time pick the lineup, figure out what the competition is all about, what their tendencies are going to be, and set that game plan up front. But then you got to play the game. So I think we're big believers that a leading practice is to score in every inning. So rather than wait till the 8th inning or 9th inning to hit that home run, is to be very shrewd about picking where you start and picking use cases, you know, prioritized for business impact and ease of implementation, and then focusing on those as a way to build momentum and success. And doing that in a backdrop, though, of that game plan. So knowing, you talked about the architecture, is what do we want our digital manufacturing capability map to look like? Think about a maturity model. and then what's the architecture behind that we need to go pull off, then start knocking those use cases down one at a time, based on ROI, to build momentum, build, score in the first inning. So then you go in the second inning, score again. And for innings for us is really kind of a quarter. We'd like to see posting some sort of result, very MVP focused, with that, what I call just-in-time foundation, is a way to build momentum and go tackle these programs that had individual conversations everything from 5 to 10 years on the amount of time it's going to take to roll out some of these programs. So that kind of combination of things is being really balanced between what's possible and what's practical, and really trying to nail things down a bite at a time.
But you got to build wins.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's the path
Yeah.
you see to success.
Yeah, it used to be, I've been in consulting longer than I can stand, but it used to be, in our world, we were looking at, if it wasn't above $1 million opportunity, then we needed to start looking elsewhere. That whole world has changed. So now our whole orientation is around, what can we go do in that first inning that has a high ROI for much less of an investment to go do that. So we'd ideally like to get, a 3 times return in the first 12 months and probably 5 to 7 in the first 3 years as we're going through these use cases. The world of, big consulting projects with big dollars up front is just no longer the truth.
Oh, that's interesting. What you described as the methodology could be quite daunting for small and medium-sized companies to move in this direction. And they're probably struggling with, well, how do I get started and how do I do this? It sounds like it's going to be a big undertaking. I got to run the business day to day. I got to put product out the door every day. How do I do both? What would you counsel them on that?
Yeah, it's that, again, balancing between what's possible and what's practical. So I, for a while, did a lot of work with companies under $1 billion, and what you don't have is a bunch of dedicated people to go do transformation. It becomes a little bit of everybody's job. So it's even more important to have that game plan going into the game, knowing what you're playing for, what your priorities are, and how you're going to generate a return for the company, knowing that it's going to be, not 3 dedicated people, but it's probably 10 people with, 10% of their time.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add?
I think too, if you get the right person in the right role, it's amazing to see what an individual, passionate digital leader or change agent can make within an organization. I know a few years ago had a client that hired a new digital leader, and they didn't have a massive budget to go develop and deploy hundreds of use cases or anything like that, but she was very digitally literate and extremely passionate about the transformation space, and she was able to put together a small but mighty program that I think delivered a lot more value than other investments that I've seen, where there was a lot more budget and a lot more people behind them. And so again, I think it comes back to kind of that human element, having the right kind of governance structure, and then having the right people in the right roles. That goes a long way, and you can do that in a cost-efficient way.
I completely agree with you. I've long believed that the linchpin to a successful digital transformation is leadership.
Absolutely.
It either makes it or doesn't make it. Yeah. We're running out of time. I can't believe how quickly this is going, but I want to ask you.
It's almost cocktail time.
Yeah, it's almost cocktail time. But I want to ask you one question, and I asked the other panel too, because I think it's a relevant question. When you think about the path we're on for smart manufacturing, what's the end state? Where do you think it's all going? If we were back here 10 years from now, what would it look like? Yeah.
I'm actually going to say I don't know. But the reason I'm going to say that is I guess I've been through a couple of areas of my consulting career. First was the ERP trend, and then it was e-commerce. I did a lot of stuff in e-commerce. And all the things, and it started in 95, I was doing it. So it was early on. And all the things we thought in 2000, about a third of those turned out to be actually true. But what we learned so much more about actually getting into operating that ended up being, at least for the retail industry, it was a massive business model disruption 20 years later. So I think we heard that from the Davos speaker, that business model innovation.
Eva.
Like if I were to make one projection forward, is what the challenge is going to be to fundamental business models as you think further out. But going back to your pot of gold analogy, I would still do it one coin at a time right now into the pot. Yeah.
Any comment on that one, Austin? What do you see?
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think that there's, an end state where you declare victory and say we're digitally transformed. So I think it'll be a culture and a process of continuous improvement.
Yeah.
And I think the technology will continue to evolve, but I think like some of the principles that we've talked about how you apply that technology in a way that's meaningful, I think those are somewhat timeless. And so, it'll continue to improve and evolve, and the technology will be different, but we'll keep getting better.
Well, gentlemen, unfortunately we're out of time. But I want to thank you, Steve, Austin. A great conversation. If you haven't seen the results of the survey, they can access it.
Yeah, RockwellAutomation.com. It's
RockwellAutomation.com.
Website right now.
Check it out because they do good work. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.